in their backyard.
All right, let's get this going. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton Equestrian Committee for Wednesday, April 16th, 2025 to order. The time now is 6:32 p.m. As I call the roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Nan Buckner.
Here.
Teresa Jarmus.
Here.
Mac Plummer.
Here.
Shannon Regan Quidley.
Here.
Tony Rich is here. Carson Seville.
Here.
Julie Shannon is not here. So we have a quorum tonight. So for the record, Julie Shannon is not here. She's still recovering from COVID. But everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag, the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For all.
For all. For all and all.
First item on our agenda tonight is the approval of the meeting agenda. Does anyone have any amendments to the agenda? If not, I would take a motion to approve our meeting agenda for tonight.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Regan Quidley and a second from Mr. Plummer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Next on our agenda is approval of our past meeting minutes. Assume everyone has received a copy of these. If I could get a motion and a second, please, to approve the meeting minutes from the March 2025 Equestrian Committee meeting.
Motion to approve last meeting's minutes.
Okay, first from Ms. Buckner.
Second.
All right, a second from Mr. Seville. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Emily, do we have any general public comment tonight?
We do.
All right, let me read this for everybody's sake. General public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the Milton Equestrian Committee and provide input and opinions on any matter on tonight's agenda. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city liaison prior to the agenda item being called. When your name is called, please come forward, speak into the microphone, state your name and your address for the record. You'll have 5 minutes for remarks. The city encourages you to review our agenda. And if you wish to speak on any particular item, please let us know. Emily, please call the first speaker.
Our first public comment is Laura Bentley.
Laura Bentley, 2500 Bethany Church Road. 5 minutes or 2?
5.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come back and speak to you casually tonight. I really appreciate the agenda item of the short-term rentals being added for your discussion. I think there were several people here last meeting for that discussion, so appreciate that very much. I also wanted to comment on the stormwater presentation from last meeting. I hadn't seen that before, and honestly, kind of caught me off guard. I don't know how y'all felt about it, but and perhaps maybe I've missed something, but I thought that the discussions were for large lot incentives. So as I sat and listened, I mean, I gotta be honest, it was the furthest thing from being an incentive as a farm owner. We provide acres of green pervious surfaces that contribute to stormwater mitigation every time it rains. And so for us to be redefined as into a, maybe there's discussions of, well, these are for new farms or old farms. I mean, that's new farms are, I think people would probably run from Milton. So that was just my interpretation of what was presented. No offense to staff or anything. I really just, as someone who's been here for 20 years and who cares deeply about our farms and keeping them, I think this committee has the most impact and input on things like that. So I appreciate you taking a hard look at that. Another item that I would caution you as far as, really thinking about is the redesignation to hobby farm. I'm not sure that people that have farms that call it a hobby. I mean, yes, it's a hobby, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a huge expense. And to lose the designation from the state as ag exempt, from the county for CUVA tax relief, I would very much caution you on making sure that no one gets disadvantaged if you consider that. And personally, we have so many working farms here, which is incredible. I mean, we really do, given that we're just on the outskirts of Metro Atlanta. And I mean, it's just a respect thing, really. Working farms is a real thing. Finally, again, I just want you to, I appreciate the short-term rentals being back on the agenda. It is an unknown area because we have never regulated it. So offering it as an incentive is something that I think we really, really need to peel back the layers, see what it is. And again, I appreciate being able to come talk to you all. Y'all are very influential, and your influence on council is very important. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura, for being here. We
Thanks,
appreciate it
Laura.
very much. Emily, can you call the next speaker?
Our next public comment is Mary Cronk.
Good evening. My name is Mary Cronk, and I'm at 600 Hickory Mill Lane. And I don't really have a lot of comments tonight, but I just want to tell you guys that I'm so thrilled that you have short-term rentals on for discussion. I did a real quick search right before the meeting, and I found even more short-term rentals than I did when I looked a month and a half ago. And one of them, not too far from here, just started getting reviews in October of 2023. They have 147 reviews in a year and a half. That's a lot of short-term rentals. And while this is being proposed as a large lot incentive, I would ask you to think of it on the flip side. This may be a large lot disincentive. If I'm moving into Milton and I'm going to buy a nice piece of property, I have no clue what could be coming to me. Maybe there's not a short-term rental right near me now, but who knows? They could sell that property, and I could have spent all that money and all that time on a property that I thought I'd have forever, and turn around, I'm going to get rid of it. So we really need to look at, is it an incentive or a disincentive? And I think you guys are on the right track, really discussing it and picking it to the bone. I appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mary. Mary, could I ask you to send me that list?
Yes, sir.
I would really appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thanks so much. Emily, do we have any more public comment?
We do not.
We do not? Christy? All right.
Greg?
Greg? All right, well, with that in mind, we will move on to the next item in our agenda, which is staff updates. Our item is discussion of large lot incentives, and we welcome our community development department. Thanks y'all for being here.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Equestrian Committee. My name is Diana Wheeler. I'm the Interim Community Development Director, and I'm very pleased to continue our discussion about large lot incentives. As a reminder, the purpose of this discussion is to try to come up with the very best ideas that we can collectively to incentivize the preservation of large lots. That doesn't mean that everything we talk about is a good idea. Some of these things are going to be things that you evaluate, you consider, and then you discount. But we will present that in that fashion to the City Council, because I believe ultimately what they want is a very thorough analysis so that we can say we've looked at everything we could think of to try to incentivize large lot, and this is the best of what we've come up with. So you recall that we had identified, these are staff things that we had identified, and of course we welcome and would look for the committee to also submit things for discussion purposes. But just to get the ball rolling, we had identified some staff discussion. First was the thought of creating a hobby farm as a distinct use from the AG exempt, not because we don't recognize that hobby farms in some cases are very much working farms, that they're not just hobbies, but as a way of distinguishing them from the large production agricultural industry that you find in South Georgia and other places. So to identify the fact that Milton has something unique and special and that can be quantified as something unique and special is one thing to consider. The next thing we talked about are perhaps stormwater credits and special design considerations for properties that are larger in size, recognizing that there are unique characteristics for some of these larger lots, and maybe there are ways that we can look at the analysis in doing our stormwater management to provide some incentives in that regard that would be incentives for folks who have larger pieces of property that people with 1 acre lots just wouldn't have access to. So those things we've talked about tonight. What we want to talk about is accessory buildings and how they're treated, maybe a way of incentivizing how they're treated for larger properties versus existing small properties, covered riding arenas, and maybe some incentives there. And we also had on our agenda short-term rentals. And what we want to do with that is simply identify what the issues are, discuss the potentials, pros and cons, and then see how that leads us into further discussion. So if we look at accessory buildings, we know that barns housing animals are allowed in the front yard, but we have other types of accessory structures that are not allowed in the front yard, such as guest houses. And there are folks who have guest houses, especially large lots, where you want to have family, friends, others come and visit, and the lot configuration doesn't always accommodate a guest house. Doesn't mean that we don't have a process, we do, but it can take months. And so one thought was that perhaps an amendment could be made for large lots to incentivize guest homes without having to go through a process by allowing them in the front, rear, or side yards for properties that are 3 acres in size or larger. That may be something that might be, maybe not a huge incentive, but it's something that is a benefit to people with larger lots than folks who have smaller lots that have to limit their guest homes to the rear, and if they can't accommodate it, then they have to go through a variance process through the Board of Zoning Appeals. So consideration might be given to perhaps changing the requirement for guest houses from an administrative approval process, things like swimming pools for administrative approval process, to just make the process easier for 3 acre or greater properties. So that's one thing that we thought perhaps could be an incentive, and maybe we were hoping to get some of your feedback on that, if that may be something that's viable. Do we not get enough bang for the buck with something like this? Is this something that might motivate somebody, or is this something that we could use in a marketing packet to try to say, hey, Milton is the place for you if you've got a horse farm, because look at all the benefits that we offer horse farms. It might be something.
Okay, I got 2 questions. First, how would the city determine if someone was using it as a guest house truly, or if someone was living in that house? I don't know how we would regulate that.
Well, it's not all that easy to do that. Now, the address, there's only one address.
Right.
There's only one power bill, so they're tied together. The electrical is tied together. But the guest house can have a kitchen, so it can be a separate unit.
But in theory, it could be a guest for the weekend, or it could be one of my adult children that lives in
Yes,
the house.
exactly.
You
Or
wouldn't
it
be able
could
to
be a
necessarily-
mother-in-law suite,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
I mean, I kind of was under the impression the accessory buildings was more run-in sheds and horse barns, not guest houses. I think the goal here is you own a horse farm, you want to put your barn, if your property is laid out where it really only makes sense to put it in the front, you can do that. And the city's not going to tell you you can't.
Well, we could certainly add that to it.
And I think that's what, y'all agree with me on that? That this was more meant for run-in sheds and stable, barns, stuff like that. Not really a guest house.
Tractor
Okay.
storage.
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
Utility type shed.
Okay.
I think we're trying to remove some red tape on that. And there's always been a lot of discussion on, is a run-in shed housing animals? My answer is no. That's a temporary housing during a storm. It's not a barn where
It's
horses
not
are
an
staying.
actual
Yeah.
barn.
So,
But back on one of your
It's a
previous slides,
shelter.
did it say that barns already are allowed
Yes, barns are allowed in the front
in the
yard.
front? Okay.
But your point about the run-in shed, that isn't. So that would be something that we should add.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
well, but are they already allowed or no?
I think some of them are.
But are they allowed with a variance or are they already allowed by
No, the
right?
barns,
Barn
housing
is allowed.
animals are allowed in the
But
front
do we
yard.
consider,
But a
A
run-in
run-in
shed
shed would
is a,
be-
is a
oh.
temporary
Right, I know. So
shelter.
that one is
Right.
not-
so it's allowed now?
It would
It's-
fall in the same category as a barn, I think.
No, it's not housing animal. Running shed is
No.
not
Right.
housing animal.
It
So
doesn't
is that
have-
allowed in the front right now or no?
It's not.
Okay.
So you would have to go through a process. So you bring up a good point, and
Variance.
that's something that we could
Yeah.
add as an incentive. If, if the council wants to amend the code to accommodate those types of accessory buildings that are accommodating either, feed or equipment or some other thing that is in furtherance of the hobby farm activity.
Yeah, because the way I look at any of these barns, any structure on one of these farms is, I'm actually going through the process of this, and I haven't built anything because the further in I build it, the less pasture I have. And the further out, closer to the property line, the more open pasture I have. So I've got to structure a fence and everything around this barn 100 feet from every property line, especially if you have a narrow property, that's tough. So I think that's more what we were looking for as far as accessory buildings, not really guest houses, but
Well, we could certainly do that. Yep, okay.
And you mentioned also, you designated it as 3 acres or larger. I mean, could there be some incentives for properties that are 10 acres perhaps that aren't available for 3 acres and vice versa?
If you have, ideas that you think would be worthwhile,
Okay.
then we certainly would throw that in there.
I mean, maybe you could have a guest house in front if you were on 10 acres. Right?
yeah, I think,
If you're on 3 acres, you
Three's
put a
pretty
guest house
tight.
in your front yard, it might not
Yeah.
really work.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, guest houses in the front yard may also not be really in the purview of what we do.
Mhm.
So,
All right.
But I think it's something good to
And I
discuss.
think,
guest house in my front yard. Nice.
It's been there since the 1800s though, right?
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
I think you need to understand what a run-in shed really is, because not all horses live in a barn all the time. Sometimes people maintain their horses in a pasture situation where they just want them to have a little shelter from the sun or a storm or whatever. So it might be a 3-sided building, it might be just a roof on poles. And I think that's where Carson's trying to,
Mhm.
Right, so we can certainly amend that to say the accessory structures that are in support of hobby farm activity, and then list those examples that you've mentioned.
horse keeping or husbandry would probably be a better, and I got to be really honest with you. My farm is not a hobby. I do not like that term at all.
yeah, I don't
Um,
either.
I don't think
Well,
any of us do. So I'd really appreciate if we could kind of brainstorm a different
Sure,
description for that.
Yeah.
Um,
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago too.
yeah.
When we had an offline meeting about hobby farms versus just general ag. And I don't think the state really gives any specific definition or differentiator between a hobby farm and an AG property.
No, they don't, but what we were suggesting is that it might make sense for Milton to have a separate distinction just because of the uniqueness of some of these farms. We don't have to call it a hobby farm, we can call it something else. But we do want to distinguish it from the large agricultural production commercial businesses that
Sure.
are in other parts of the state.
But I brought, yeah, okay, I was going to bring up, I think, when you talk about a large agricultural production business, do we have any property in the city of Milton that would fall into that category?
I'm not aware. It's possible, but I'm not aware. So that's something we could certainly research.
I just think, if we're going to,
If we can clarify that, I
if
think
we
that
want to go
would-
down the road of actually creating some sort of a distinction, I just think it's worthy to find out if we've got different categories of property in our
I
city.
think that
And
might
I
make
don't
it
know.
more confusing for everybody.
I agree.
I think we need to nix the whole hobby farm in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just adding more, because everybody's going to, no matter what we put in place, every one of these farm owners is going to have to learn all this and try to understand it. And the more confusing we make it, well, you're a hobby farm, you're actually
Mhm.
ag,
I agree.
a farm's a farm is what it is.
I I mean, whether you're on 8 acres and feeding 4 horses, or if you're on 180 acres and feeding 30 horses, you're still cleaning stalls, putting hay out, planting
Well, and the
seed
majority of
pastures.
it-
You're doing all the same things, just on potentially a smaller scale. But I think the activities are very similar, if not the exact same.
Well, the majority of us are not doing farming, our form of our farm for commercial purposes. While, yes, years ago, I used to consign horses, train them and sell them. And that was the initial application of my farm. I don't do that anymore, but I still have the same serious nature and same husbandry practices that I did when I was a commercial farm.
Well, and to Jeff's presentation, though, the word commercial is nowhere in the state definition. So we got to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need to put that into our definition. if the
absolutely
state doesn't
not.
Put it in the definition. I think that's really dangerous for us to go down that path.
Okay.
Okay.
So now let's look at covered riding areas, which you can have with a use permit with 5 acres of property. A lighted riding area also requires 5 acres and a use permit. And covered and lighted riding area requires a use permit and 10 acres. So the acreage is one issue to discuss, but also the fact that there's a use permit involved. That use permit is a process. And some might think that because it's a fairly lengthy process, it might be an onerous process. Maybe that discourages having these types of equestrian facilities. Perhaps one thing to consider might be to allow these covered riding areas and lighted riding areas and covered and lighted areas as permitted uses and not require a public hearing process. So that's something that you may want to weigh in on and talk about.
Okay. Anybody have thoughts on that?
My first thought on this, that I could see a problem for a farm owner facing is impervious surface and having to do all the stormwater for this new.
Yeah, ask Carolyn.
Yeah, I'm sure she would, but I wonder if the ag exemption would play a role in that.
I don't know,
Because
would
would
the-
these be considered impervious, Shubo, the uncovered arenas? I mean, if it's basically sand, it's not gravel. You know,
What
they
is
could-
it considered?
So if we put, like, can you see the pictures?
Yeah, I'm
It's
seeing
the lower picture.
Uh-huh.
Would the city consider that impervious surface?
It is impervious.
Even though it's not gravel, it's,
The rainwater can seep into the ground, so it's impervious.
so they'd need to do stormwater runoff for
I'm
that.
sorry, I meant to say pervious.
Okay, yeah.
I meant to say
Well, because
pervious.
gravel's impervious under the city code.
Well, it depends on how it's applied. Now, if it's crushed in like a surface area, if it's just used as a ground cover in certain applications, it's not. If you're driving on it, it is.
Okay.
So even if the water would soak into the ground of an arena, you're saying it would be pervious, not impervious?
If it's not covered,
Now, the covered one would
the
definitely be
cover is what
impervious.
makes it
No, I mean,
Doesn't matter
I mean
what
an
this-
uncovered arena, an outdoor arena.
Yeah, that bottom picture is,
That's allowed
that's pervious.
anywhere.
That's perfect.
And that
So you
wouldn't
wouldn't
matter
need any
what.
stormwater for that, basically.
No, I mean, assuming that you're not like doing a lot of grading or something like that, which creates a runoff situation. If you had a hillside and you're creating a flat area, obviously there are other considerations.
Okay.
Those are both beautiful riding arenas.
I was going to say, do you recognize those, Mac?
Yeah, it looks like it's got fancy footing.
So
Yeah,
this essentially, though, would just not have a public hearing if someone wanted to do this. Is that, am I reading
Well,
that
right now it requires a public
Yeah,
hearing.
no, the incentive would remove that.
If you recommended that no use permit be required and the council ultimately made that change, then it wouldn't require a special hearing. It would just go through the normal permitting process.
So to play devil's advocate on that for a second, let's say you had someone that was on 7 acres and they wanted a covered riding arena. And if you did not require any sort of public input session, the neighbor would just have to live with it, whether it was in their backyard. I mean,
Well, there are setback requirements.
right? Okay.
So if
So what
they-
would the I'm just to educate me, what would the setbacks be?
100-foot setback.
100-foot setback.
So if they
Okay.
met that setback requirement, they could just do it without going through a public hearing process.
Okay.
Now, if they went through a public hearing process and they met the 100-foot setback requirements and did like that bottom picture, I'm not sure
Right.
what the grounds would be for denying it. So the process itself then becomes burdensome.
I understand. Okay.
Did that go through planning?
Yes.
Okay.
What would be the downside of allowing it? On 7
Well, I guess
acres?
if your neighbor didn't want to look at a covered riding arena,
I think the lights would be.
I think, but it says minimum 10 acres though,
well, it still says 5, right?
I would think when.
or covered and lighted.
More
It
so.
says minimum of 5.
Covered.
But there's
Oh,
still
you're
a
Covered
100
riding
yards.
arena, minimum of 5
Yeah,
acres.
100.
Wasn't it 10 acres before?
It is 10 acres for covered and lighted, but just if it's a lighted.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So lighted only is 5, covered only is 5, but if you have covered and lighting, it has to be 10?
Correct.
Okay.
But still with a 100-foot setback on either.
Do they make covered ones down
I'm sorry?
Yes,
Still, it's
100-foot
100-foot
setback.
setback on either.
Yeah, 100-foot
So-
setback.
Well, you can not
Yes,
put
you
lights
can.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that.
But now
I can't
if,
imagine
if the
why
use-
you would do that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
because
the
once
use
you cover
permit,
it, you've
let's say-
got more shadows for
Right.
horses to deal with. So I don't know anybody that would build a covered ring without lighting.
if the
Okay.
use permit goes away and we make it by right, we can also include things that we would normally include as conditions of zoning, such as, that cutoff shields on the light so that the light doesn't spill over onto adjacent property and other
Right.
things, that most people would be worried about that usually come up at a public hearing.
Okay. I would think the city could have some design requirements that would keep the light from spilling onto the neighboring property. I mean, our covered arena is 150 feet from my house, and I can't even tell it's on if the lights are on it.
Mhm.
But they designed it to where the lights are recessed and they shine straight down and they don't bleed out into the
Right.
neighboring land, which is great. So I think if you had certain codes or certain,
Around the lighting.
yeah, around the lighting, I don't think that would be a real big issue. So, okay,
Okay.
all right.
And you can also, if you're comfortable with only 10 acres and more to get rid of use permit, you can let us know that, because if you think that 5 acre is not enough I mean, the 5 acre properties need to go through use permit, we can do that, and we can have that incentive only for the properties that are 10 acre or more.
No, I like the 5.
I like
Go
the
ahead.
But yeah, I'm just wondering, if the setback is the same on either.
Yeah.
Then that's only affecting their property if they're on a smaller
doesn't
property.
matter.
So if it's not affecting another neighbor, then why should we regulate that?
Yeah, why would it be a problem, right?
Right.
The question is, would it affect the neighbor?
Well, it's still 100 setback, whether you're on 10 acres or 5.
Right.
So,
No, I get it. Okay.
And the majority of covered rings that are going to be built anyway are going to be like yours with the lights going straight down. There's not anybody that's going to project light outside. I mean, I'm looking at that picture. of
If you had a lighted
Max
outdoor
ring where
arena
you've got,
that's
but
not
those are just
covered, I think
guide
you'd have a
lights
real
for
light
people to
issue.
get to the ring. That's
Right.
not,
Those
are Yes.
actually outside lights, not inside. So
Right.
those are just so like if you're walking around at dusk, you don't run into something.
right, right.
Okay.
I think anything we can do to
I
incentivize
agree.
people building these,
Mhm.
that's going to keep the next person that buys that place
Right.
keeping it a farm.
I'm
just
curious, back to your point, Nan, does anybody build a covered arena and not put lights in it? Because if it's raining, it's not.
I can't imagine anybody would, and just from the sheer nature of horses, it's funny, when I think about, here in Georgia, we talk about covered rings. Where I'm from in Ohio, they're indoors, okay? They have walls and things around them. And even then, when you've got sun shining through, leaving a mark in the footing, that offends a lot of horses. So you always try to light that, area. I can't imagine anybody doing a jumper course on a cloudy day in a covered ring. You would definitely need to have lights on, but
Maybe
you never
there's
know.
somebody
I
that
mean,
might
some
want it.
dressage riders, maybe they don't need, I don't know, but I can't imagine anybody would build a ring without lights, a covered ring without lights.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Moving on to short-term rental discussion. So what's currently allowed, because we have things that sort of maybe feel a little bit like short-term rentals, and those are the bed and breakfasts and country inns. The code allows bed and breakfast and country inn, and those are private residences where there are guest rooms, and visitors stay for 30 or fewer days. Now, for a bed and breakfast, only breakfast is provided. For a country inn, you can have more than just the breakfast. For bed and breakfast, no more than 5 guest rooms. For a country inn, at least 6 guest rooms, 5 acres of property. But the reason that it's in the code and is allowed, again, with a use permit, but it is an option, is because in both scenarios, the property owner lives on the property. So that, I think, is probably what provides a certain comfort level that things are going to be managed properly because the owner lives on the property. So now let's look at current listings on Airbnb and VRBO with regard to these short-term rentals, because we know that we have them in the city. They're not regulated. In fact, they're prohibited. But we tend to be reactionary when it comes to code enforcement. So when we get complaints, we're on it. But if we don't get complaints, you know, we're not really proactively seeking these out, although we could. There are currently 5 rental properties listed in Milton. What I thought was amusing is that 4 of them proclaim themselves to be in Alpharetta. They're not, but they want to be associated with Alpharetta because all of the amenities that they think will attract people, Avalon, downtown, the mall, all that stuff, it's all in Alpharetta. So they claim to be in Alpharetta. They're actually in Milton. But of these 5 rental properties, 2 are actually guest houses on owner's property. 1 is a barn on the owner's property, and it's outfitted quite nicely. It's not a barn in the sense that there are animals in there. It's just a residential barn. 1 is a basement apartment in an owner's home, and only 1 out of the 5 is an actual standalone house that you could rent the whole house. Every other one, 4 out of the 5.
Is it on Bethany Church Road?
I'm sorry?
Is it on Bethany Church Road?
No.
Anyway.
Four out of the 5 all have owners residing on the property. And my guess is that that's one of the reasons why we're not hearing a lot about problems with these short-term rentals. I'm not saying that we're not going to get more of them, or we haven't had in the past, or that sort of thing, or there isn't a lot of activity. But the fact that the owner lives on the property provides a certain level of management that you probably wouldn't get if there was no owner on the property. So that's currently the situation that we have now. So looking at some of the pros and cons. And
Can you go
certainly
back to that slide? I just had a question before we move on.
Yes.
So you're saying currently it's allowed to, we can have bed and breakfast inns and country inns?
Yes,
That's
with a
allowed?
use permit.
With a specific use permit?
With a use permit, you go through a process. If
Okay.
you can demonstrate that you meet all the criteria, presumably you would be allowed to have a bed and breakfast or a country inn.
And how many bed and breakfast inns and country inns do we have in Milton?
I am not aware. I don't know.
I think there are just 2.
2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I know we have one that's proposed up on the Arnold Mill, near the Chadwick landfill area.
In Milton?
There's a proposal for a country inn. But in any case, that's what the code currently allows.
Okay.
So pros and cons, and these are just some of them. There are plenty probably on both sides. But the pros of having regulations on short-term rentals is that regulations can control them and restrict activities, maybe in some cases for things that already exist. Regulations also ensure that if there are community expectations about how these short-term rentals operate, that those expectations are established and could be met because they would be known in advance. Right now, nobody knows what's acceptable because it's all prohibited. And it can also be limited to large lots if that would be considered an incentive for large lots where we have 3 acres or more. With regard to cons, if you create something that's permissible, then in theory, you authorize this use and that may encourage more of them. So if you have more of them and they're not monitored properly and not managed properly either by the owner or by through code enforcement paying attention to them, then we have more issues than we really would want to have. So those are some of the cons associated with allowing the short-term rentals.
Okay.
So one thing I did was I thought about if you wanted to consider short-term rentals, right, what would be some of the concerns that people would have about them? And there are probably more than this, but the things that I've heard in the past, high volume guest turnover. If you've got somebody coming in every week, that could be an issue. Excessive noise from parties or things like that, maybe you don't normally find in residential neighborhoods. Maybe they have a lot of vehicles because there are a lot of different people coming. If it's a family reunion, who knows how many cars show up. And sometimes you have absentee or even corporate homeowners. So they don't necessarily manage the properties the way that a person living on the property might. But if these short-term rental concerns could be addressed through regulation, then maybe you might be willing to consider if you think it's an incentive. So I thought of some things that maybe could be potential regulations. So for example, if short-term rentals were considered, then maybe one of the requirements would be that there is an application form, affidavits, annual registration, business license, and other things to make sure that the people who are doing this understand what they're signing up for, what the rules are, and that they swear, right? They notarize their signature and attest to the fact that they will comply with these regulations. We'd also want to make sure that we have 1 or 2 contact people for each property so that if there is a problem, we can immediately get to whoever is responsible and deal with it. Minimum 3 acres, if it's considered an incentive, this would be for large lots only. Maximum 6 vehicles visible from the roadway. No parking in the right-of-way or in the front setback of the property. Maximum 2 guests per bedroom, 12 guests total. The property owner must reside on the property. And this is unique to, short-term rentals as a requirement. We have this in our bed and breakfast and our country inn requirements. As far as I know, nobody in this area that allows short-term rentals requires the owner to reside on the property. But this would, if you consider this might be something that gives you a comfort level that the property will be managed properly. Obviously, no signage. They cannot create noise, light, or traffic that constitutes a nuisance to neighbors. And if 2 or more complaints are received within a 12-month period, then the authorization to have this short-term rental would be subject to revocation. So these are pretty strict standards if you felt like short-term rental would be an incentive for a large lot. So that's something to think about.
So I have a question. I think you mentioned in one of your previous slides that we currently have 5
Yes,
listed
currently,
on Airbnb and VRBO.
correct.
And those are unallowed.
That's correct. They're
That's allowed.
prohibited.
Has code enforcement ever visited one of these properties or issued a citation for having an unallowed short-term rental?
Not these properties, but where we've had them, where they've been problematic in the past, they've been given citations.
Okay. So when I see this list of potential regulations, if we're really not issuing citations for 5 properties that we know are not allowed, but we come up with a pretty substantial list of requirements, would we have any confidence that code enforcement would be able to learn all these requirements and go out and start writing tickets for the stuff? Or you see what I'm saying? I mean, we've got 5 properties that are not allowed. I'm just curious. I mean, it's only 5 properties. How come code enforcement hadn't gone out and written 5 tickets? I mean, it doesn't sound that complicated.
Well, it's not complicated. It just hasn't been problematic in the sense that we haven't received any complaints. Now,
Well, I mean, we had one of our ladies back there just came up and talked about it and is going to send me a list of all of them. That sounds like a complaint. Again, this isn't challenging you, Diane. I'm just asking, why hasn't code enforcement written 5 tickets for 5 illegal short-term rentals? Now, if we decide to allow short-term rentals and we come up with a list of requirements, okay, then they aren't breaking the law. But in theory, we have 5 short-term rentals that are being operated in Milton and no one's written a ticket for it. I'm just curious how we would expect code enforcement to manage a list of 8 or 10 criteria when they can't write tickets for 5 that aren't allowed anyway.
So the criteria is for the purpose of the criteria is for really the benefit of the property owner. When they sign up for this business, they
Right.
have to attest to the fact that they will comply with all of these regulations. And
Sure.
then, for example, let's say they attest to the fact that they won't have more than 6 vehicles.
Yeah, I get that.
And then there are 8 vehicles. And so now we have a regulation that says, you know, we can cite them for having more vehicles. Right now, we would go through a process to just eliminate that use, period. But by having regulations and making the property owners aware of those regulations, they would have to comply with the regulations, and then we would enforce the regulation. The alternative right now is to just shut everybody down, and we can do that. It hasn't been where we've experienced problems, we've done that.
Right, I understand.
We just haven't experienced any problems. That doesn't mean it isn't occurring, and we can certainly do that if that's the directive that the city wants. It just hasn't been a problem in the past, and where it has been, then we've been proactive.
Okay.
There is a city regulation right now saying you can't.
Yeah, it's against the ordinance right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
So there is a regulation right now that says you can't use your house for short term.
That's right. You can't rent properties. Now, if one of these, you know, short-term rentals was rented for more than 30 days, that would be different. But most of these are not rented for more than 30 days.
But that
They're
is allowed, more than 30
More than
days.
30, yes,
Yeah,
that's allowed. Yes, it's just short-term, less than 30 days or fewer. And most of these, you know, Airbnb are for, or at least when you go to sign up for it, you can sign up for fewer than 30 days.
Yeah.
If they set up the website such that you couldn't do less than 30 days, they would be fine.
I get that.
I have a problem with the property owner must reside on the property. I think that's going to be really hard to verify. I mean, how in the world are we going to verify that? Who's going to enforce it? And more than anything, I think it makes the neighbors become code enforcers. I don't know how that, how can we determine that they are going to live there? They're going to sign, yes, we live here, and then move to Massachusetts.
Well, and they would do that with the bed and breakfast and a country inn as well.
They could.
So we have that scenario. We have to rely on people's honesty, and then when we have evidence that they haven't been honest, then we will be able to do something about it.
So let me say a couple things on
I just don't
this.
think that's enforceable.
Yeah, well, I agree with you.
I don't think it's enforceable.
So I appreciate you putting all this together. I'm 100% not in favor of this. I've talked to a lot of different farm owners and a lot of cities that already don't allow this. We got 225 active farms as of today with another 80 that don't have horses on them. None of them, I don't think, would want an Airbnb on the side of their pasture, messing with their horses, walking around the property, opening a gate, whatever, you know, in 1 a.m. My first thought is the city's not open on the weekends or at nights. So when things are really getting ugly, the farm owner is going to be the one, or the homeowner is going to be the one trying to call the police or whoever, take pictures, send it to code enforcement. By the time they get out there, it's over. And these people don't live in Milton. They're from out of town. They really don't care what happens, how much noise they make. And a simple solution is if we ban it, you just email Airbnb and VRBO, and the listings are not allowed to go up because it's prohibited. And other cities have told me that's what they've done, and it's a simple fix.
I suspect with the right communication, those 5 listings would go away in about a week.
Mhm.
I just
The
think
city would
it's
take
gonna,
action on
it's
that. I just
absolutely
would
a
be
DNC.
I just feel
Right.
like it doesn't fit our vision. Does
No.
that make sense? It doesn't really fit what our mission statement is. I mean, if you come here and you spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars on acres, and you build a barn and you have your horses, and then you look out and you've got, you know, an Airbnb next to you, and the kids from the Airbnb are overfeeding your horses who can't have a carrot because they'll choke on it. I mean, there's just a lot of things
Or
to
shooting
it
the
that
fireworks off like.
or the
we
fire. I
heard.
just don't think that it's.
I think
gonna
it
be
goes
so
against
hard
our
to-
rural heritage more
Yeah.
than anything. I mean, there's that whole movement to keep Milton rural. I think this is the most anti-rural thing we could come up with.
It might be an incentive somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't think it fits what we're trying to do.
Understood.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think that's a general consensus. It's just not a fit. Even though in theory, it could be an incentive. I just think it's a bad idea for Milton.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. Anything else on that?
We can skip the
I'll
next.
say, do
agenda
we
item.
need to?
No, I didn't know that was on her presentation. She told me when I walked in. But
Okay, all
I
right.
appreciate you doing all that.
Yeah, that
Lorena.
was
It's a
helpful.
lot
That
of
was a
work
good
and-
discussion. We need to have that discussion. So, yeah, I think that was a really good discussion, so.
Thanks, Diane.
All right, well, with that in mind, we will skip the new business item A on short-term rentals. I think we've covered that one pretty well. And our next item on the agenda would be our unfinished business, and we can talk a little bit about Meet the Neighbors.
Meet the Neighbors is coming up.
Very excited about that.
Yes, and actually things seem to be going in full swing. We have live music this year. It seems like all the vendors are nailed down. Very organized. Emily's amazing. It's kind of like running on autopilot. What we need to do though is get a sign-up sheet going. That date is coming right around the corner. It's second Saturday, I believe, of May. It's only from 10 to 2. So we were talking about it.
Miss
It makes sense
Teresa,
To have 2 people.
Can
manning.
you, Ms. Teresa, can you speak in the mic, please?
Oh, yeah. 2 people manning the table from 10 to 12, and then 2 people from 12 to 2, and then a cleanup crew and a breakdown crew.
Okay.
So we just need people to sign up for that.
And we have the sign-up genius already?
We came.
Yep.
Yeah, put it out there. Let's say it.
Teresa, if you can send me those shifts, I'll create a sign up genius and
Okay.
send it out.
Sounds
That'd be
good.
great.
One thing that I personally need, the band needs a generator. We own it. We have a 9,000 watt generator, but to move, I know, very impressive. To move
Really?
it from one place to another requires someone not with my noodle arms. So if any of you guys are available on Friday to help us move, or on the flip side, if you have a generator that you already can get on and off a truck easily, I can provide the fuel, no problem.
We'll
come get it.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect.
That's no problem. It's the 9th, right? Friday the 9th?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's.
I'm sure that's fine.
I'll find out where it is right now. I think it's at Broadwell.
Okay,
We do have little ramps as well that kind of help out.
no problem. You just say when, where, whatever, and I can promise you between the 3 guys here, we'll get it done.
You got it.
No problem. Although Nan could probably throw it over her shoulder and carry it.
100%.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Well, yeah, no problem. We'll take care of it.
Don't challenge me.
I know. How you feeling about vendors?
The vendors, we have a great.
Yeah,
Good list?
Our vendors are good. We have good
There's-
vendors this year.
Good number of vendors compared to last year?
Well, it's about the same.
It's about the same.
Okay.
Bit different mix.
They're very equestrian oriented. Everybody knows
Mhm.
that. So it's
Do you
great.
have any vendor types that you really would love to have, but we can't seem to get one? Or you got any real holes in the system you're trying to fill that we could help with?
We have arts, we have crafts, we have stables,
We have tack, we have,
tack. We talked about the Cherokee Feed and Seed. I don't know if you heard back from them.
I did not.
They usually
you
always
talk to
come.
them?
They do. I haven't heard from them.
Yeah, we hadn't heard back from them. That's one.
Who'd
that
you
we
talk
can
to?
do.
Who'd you talk to?
I'll need to
You have
look
to
up.
talk to Alan or Steve.
Alan.
I have their personal cell phone numbers.
Yeah.
Well, text them away. Like,
Can
hey, we
you do
noticed
that?
you weren't
Yeah.
coming. We still have
Can you
space.
sure
I didn't
Alan.
know that you didn't.
Well, they did a great job last year. I mean, they really, they had the ladies out there, the nutritionists last year. I thought that was really good. So if they come back this year,
Mhm.
I told the one young lady, I said, normally she's loading hay.
Yeah,
And
she is.
I didn't even know who she was because she was
Oh,
like
yeah.
clean. Normally she's covered in alfalfa dust. So,
May 10th, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Day before Mother's Day.
An official event is 10 to 2. I will be on site starting at 7 a.m.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can get
So if
that.
anybody wants to join me at 7 a.m.
yeah, I can come early, whatever.
Actually will.
Yeah.
'cause
Please.
We'll probably have baseball at some
I was
point.
gonna say,
Yeah.
What it
yeah.
is.
That's awesome.
I'll
We
be
can
there
definitely come
early if
early,
you
no
want.
problem.
Helping out with vendors and getting people checked in where they need to go would be a huge help. And I need to figure out what Friday looks like. I can't decide if I want to stake the ground with people's booth numbers or if I'm going to go around with, we have like temporary field paint that we could use too. I feel like the stakes might be easier to see.
Yeah, I would do the stakes.
Yeah, I like steaks.
And then we're going to have, instead of, I called it a trident. Last year we had the trident where we had like 3 sides and then one right down the middle. I think we're just going to do one giant semicircle, and then we can have picnic. We have picnic tables that we rented. We'll have
awesome.
T-layer right in the middle. So,
You can put in foot jumps.
and then
out there,
everybody
I'm sure.
can park their car behind their booth.
Bring those.
Be fun.
Mhm.
We can have a beer wagon
Good
next to the
job
foot
on
jumps.
There you go.
Done a good job.
That'd be great.
Add a little something to it.
Yes,
Mhm.
I like
And
this.
we'll have the MEC welcome wagon.
I know, that's.
So we'll have everybody else, and then MEC welcome wagon will be front and center. You'll come, you'll grab your bag. It'll be easy peasy.
I talked to Laura Maloney the other day,
Mhm.
and I told her how we had brainstormed the idea of having demonstrations.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think she's thinking through that. She's going to get like an endoscope or something and see if she can explore something. I don't know.
Yeah, she usually brings her dental tools. It's like a giant violin case and a
And a skull.
And a skull.
Yeah.
And she'll kind of demo.
I told her, I said, can we do an exam? Can you float some teeth? Can can we come up with something? And I don't know, she might come up with something, but
Not good.
I think the more live
I
demonstration
know,
stuff,
we almost had a rodeo. We have a rodeo.
I still think the farrier is a great idea,
Yeah,
but
but
enough
you
space.
can't get them to
shoe horse.
not come to a thing and not make money.
Well, if it was time for me to shoe my horses, I'd haul them over there and let them shoe away for that.
Yeah.
What did you think about the whole grooming thing?
I think the grooming would be awesome.
Because, the different brushes and when you use
They would
them
love
and why
that.
you
It's a
use
great idea.
Yeah.
Not that the kids would clean the hooves, but show them how you clean a hoof and,
Yeah.
and the frog, and they don't have, you know what I'm saying? Like,
This would be really cool.
kind of fun.
Who's bringing horses?
Brush.
Lots of people.
Barefoot
Save
ranch.
the horses, barefoot ranch.
So could you ask them to bring them dirty so we can practice grooming on them?
Well, Barefoot Ranch's horses will be busy doing pony rides.
Okay. Oh, not that one.
But we also have,
Save the
hang on, I'm trying to
horses
pull up my full list.
I think that'd be really neat to have just more
I don't
active
know if they're
things.
coming
The
this
Special
Friday.
Equestrians is bringing, I believe they're dwarves.
Maybe have somebody
We have,
making a design.
Bringing some farm animals.
warehouses.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Huh, I like that. Okay.
Georgia Arabian.
They don't bring horses.
Yeah, she didn't usually bring horses.
They are
have a-
bringing a horse, aren't they? Georgia Arabian?
They are.
They did last
Yeah.
year.
Mhm.
They're bringing them.
Dang.
They're bringing them, Jake the Donkey.
Take the donkey. That's what I'm talking
Is
about.
Jackie coming with her donkeys this year?
You betcha.
horse.
Right.
Anything to adopt them out.
Yep, Special Equestrians
Yeah, the
will
problem
be
with
there
Jackie's
as
adoption,
well.
those are expensive.
Yeah.
And that's
They're
it.
expensive.
If it was the same adoption fee as adopting a cat, she'd probably get rid of them all.
Where's that big horse cutout that we used last year?
It's in my garage.
Do you wanna bring
Russell,
that?
I think he's broken.
Oh,
Isn't his
no.
neck's
Oh,
just kind of
yeah.
I have
flopping
no
now?
idea. I just,
I know,
Susan
that one
Kim-
got taken by the wind
Susan
at the
Kim has been
Crabapple
looking
Fest.
for that.
well, I told everybody where it was and people, I think
That's
Shannon
on
said,
me
I'm
then.
coming to get it. I'm like,
I
okay.
need to get that.
Yeah, you need to get that because she keeps bugging me about that.
All
She's
right.
like, hey, I really need my horse.
I think I took it home after
Oh,
Crab
funny.
Apple Fest and this has been there the whole time. So
Oh, boy.
anyway, all right.
Well, we can bring him to meet the neighbors.
We'll bring
He's
him.
very flimsy
His
though.
neck is flimsy.
We can fix
We
him.
had a hard time
Put
with
duct
him.
tape in.
We'll fix him up.
Did anybody
All
get the Milton Equestrian banner?
I have it. It's upstairs.
Did anybody get the plastic horse like we did last year? Or
That one you wheeled in there last year? Where's that from?
that's from Mike Gelb.
So we can get that probably, right?
I am not in
But I'm
the
saying we can
position
probably
to
get it, right?
transport it. It needs to be transported in a horse
In a
trailer,
horse
and it's
trailer.
very.
What did we do with that last year? It just sat
They're
there?
back in the trailer.
you
Did
just
anybody do anything with it last year? I can't remember.
I draped the banner on it, and it was right at the entrance.
If that's something you guys want, and I'm happy to go get it if y'all want it.
Give Mike a
It's
call.
just a big giant plastic
I could
horse.
probably bring it over there if you could advertise.
I'm not gonna lie. It's extremely difficult to get in and out of his parking lot with a horse trailer.
Yeah, you gotta back it up to right where you want.
And it's on,
It's on wheels, right?
I guarantee you Mike would bring it over. Hey,
he wouldn't bring it over for me last year, but you can try.
Mike and I both went to Alabama.
Y'all decide if you want it, and we'll figure out a way to get it if you guys want it. Just
Alright.
think about it if
I
you
don't
want.
remember it.
She went.
It looks just like that statue over by Milton Library in the roundabout. It's about that
Here, I'll
big.
show
isn't it?
you what it
Yeah, he's
looks like.
big.
It's big. So, but like I said, y'all decide if it's something you want, and we'll figure out. Again, it's kind of like the generator. We'll figure out how to haul it out there. That's not a big deal.
All right.
So, all right.
We had talked about doing the CPR AED training, and if we could pick a date for that, then we could advertise it during.
We
the
could
meeting.
advertise it. Okay, I think that's a wonderful idea. Steve Corey keeps sending me stuff all the time saying, we're doing it this date, we just need to pick a
If we can
date.
pick a date before that, we have 4 weeks, so pick a date, then we can at least get something printed up and
Okay.
leave it on our table.
All right, do you guys want to come up with some suggestions on a date?
Does he have some available or can we bring up our own dates?
I think if we come up with our own dates, we can just ask Steve, are you available any of these dates? And I'm sure he'll pick one. So y'all just kind of, whenever, I mean,
I just did the CPR AED training at the Red Cross on Monday at 5:30, and that was a great time. The class was huge. There was about 18 people there. So
wow.
I would suggest that we try to do something after the work hour. You know, 5:30 was when the class started. And now with daylight hours being longer, I think we'd do better if we did it at, you know, early evening, 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Where are you guys planning on doing this? Do you want, I mean, we've offered before, but we do have Milton facilities that if this is a Milton program, which it is hosted by the Equestrian
Yeah.
Committee, you are able to use any of our facilities.
Okay.
No charge whatsoever.
Oh, the
How about the place
community,
we met?
the community room
Yeah,
where we
that
used
was
to
nice.
meet would be a
Yeah,
good
right
place.
here.
Right there.
Yeah.
That'd probably be pretty good. The one thing I was going to ask Steve about, you know, is the
Community place.
equipment, like the AEDs, the demo AEDs, the dummies that you're doing the CPR on
Preston.
and stuff, you know.
It's Preston.
Preston, well, I
'Cause
know
you're
he was
Preston.
going to get a bunch of them, so it'd be interesting to see if he feels comfortable that we can load them up in a truck and he can bring them over here. If he can do that, then I think we do it at community center. That'd be great.
How many people would you anticipate? Because if we're talking, if we have dummies, if we have people, if there's a lot of equipment in there, you might not be able to do
Yeah.
more than 10
We
comfortably.
did our class, there was 20 people and there were 6 mannequins.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried
And
about
then
the size of the room.
Yeah.
It's a very small room.
The room that, if you've ever been to the Red Cross's CPR school, it's a 1950s brick ranch, and the room that we were in was maybe 10 by 12.
Okay, so that room's big enough. You have
Yeah.
to get all the tables and put them in the closet.
No,
right?
you
I
just
mean,
put-
you also
just
have
put
the
rows of
entire community.
chairs.
If it's open, you have the community center as well, which is a much larger space with
That'd be fun,
tables
too.
and
Oh,
chairs
you
and
mean
a
up
whole
at
parking lot.
at the,
Dinsmore
yeah.
Oh.
That's not even, if it's big
and
enough crowd,
Bethwell, which is
Yeah.
a smaller facility, but
still. I think
still
that'd be
both
great.
larger than
The
community
community center
place.
might be a really good spot. I
Mhm.
like that a lot because you got those big rooms to the left.
Absolutely. And you're right down the street from Fire
That is
Station 42.
accessible,
So
That's awesome.
It was accessible.
Well, let's figure out how many people and,
Well, I
can,
think we need a date first.
yeah, y'all figure out a date. Tell me when you want to do it and then we can get Steve easily synced up with our calendars on that.
and then I can check availability as well. So if you find dates, I can tell you if the club is available or not.
And if you advertise it at Meet the Neighbors, it would potentially be a couple of weeks after that, maybe?
Right.
So
So
you're,
if we're in May 10th,
you're talking about towards the end of May or into June?
right? Because, but then everybody's out of school and it starts getting crazy.
But everybody will be home that first week of July usually.
No, everybody's away. I'm in Alaska.
So when do you want to, you thinking May or you want to go to June?
What's that
I
one?
think June.
I think June would be good.
Early June?
Yeah.
If you push to June, you'll need to do Bethwell or Community Place since we run our summer camp in June and July at the club. Well, MCPP.
Okay.
But if we're at 6:30, that would still be summer camp?
Yeah,
Oh,
but the
long
whole
days.
thing set up, we pretty much block out the whole summer.
Okay. All right, well, let's, again, you tell me when you want and then we can get Steve synced up. That's no problem.
Are you thinking a weekend or a weeknight?
No, it should be a weeknight, don't you think?
Like a Thursday?
A Wednesday or?
Or Thursday?
Wednesday.
Good. I think a
Fourth or
Wednesday's
the
good.
Not the 18th, that's the MEC meeting.
What'd you say?
But not June 18th because that's this meeting.
Oh, that's
Do the
this meeting.
4th.
What about the 4th or the 11th?
I can't do the 11th, I can do the 4th.
How about the 5th or the 12th? Those are
Can't do
Thursdays.
the Pony Derby finals is the 11th to the 15th, so
How about the 4th or the 5th?
4th or 5th is fine.
Why don't we ask Steve if he can do the 4th or the 5th?
That's fine.
4th or 5th is fine with me.
All right.
All right,
If
I'll
you
make-
do the 4th, Bethwell is available. If you do the 5th, nothing is available.
So let's do
Well,
the
that
4th.
makes it easy, so it's the 4th. The
Let's
4th
do
at
it.
Bethwell,
Yes.
and that's on Hopewell, right at Cogburn.
Yes.
And are we going to do the fire
That's close
safety
to
one
home.
again?
Did that get recorded?
I'm sorry, I'm texting Steve Corey.
Fire safety
Sorry,
thing,
there's
did
nobody
that-
here, so I didn't think anybody was watching me.
No, I don't
That could
think
have been on the
so.
series. That could have been the first one from the series.
Yeah,
All right, so I asked Steve, are you available to do MEC CPR AD training on June 4th? So I'll let you know what he says. All right, see, that was easy. Good job, guys.
And as far as like the fire safety thing, I mean, that was great that Lori DiPucci sponsored it last year. I don't know if we want to try to do that avenue again.
The big problem, I felt bad for Lori last year. She bought like 60-something Chick-fil-A sandwiches. And we had 20 people show up, so we all ate more sandwiches for like 4 days. Yeah, so I felt bad that she did all that expensive renting chairs and buying all that food, and we couldn't get anybody to show up. So I almost think this year we do RSVPs on that thing, and maybe have, we like RSVPs, so we'll feed you. And then, have a few extras for stragglers that show up.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure we could get somebody to sponsor it. Lori'd probably do it again because she was pretty fired up about it last time.
Well, she's with a different brokerage now.
Is she really?
Yeah, she's with Berkshire Hathaway now.
Okay, I don't know about that. That's great.
Yeah, she was with
Who
Keller
were the people
Williams.
that showed up? Like where, local Barnes or?
A couple local barns,
I
like
know.
my Hannah
Which
showed up,
office?
she and her
Don't know.
managers, that was easy. They walked across the driveway.
Have to find out.
I'm trying to think who came to
I
that
haven't
thing.
seen
You
her.
came,
I
right?
came.
Shannon, did you come to that?
Yes.
Shannon was there.
We had fun.
Yeah, so.
That was fun. I like the
But it
real
wasn't
fire
the
extinguisher.
crowd that I thought was gonna show.
Like who would
Well, you
reach
always
out
think
to
you're
next
gonna
time?
know what to do, but then you realize you really don't. So.
We almost have to make an effort as a committee to start calling all the barn owners that we know and seeing if we can recruit people to come to it.
I
You know
think
what I mean?
that's what it needs to be.
Just really reach out, because you can do the social media, we should, right? Why not? But you got to figure out more of almost like a direct way to reach out and get people to come to it, I don't know. I thought it was really good last time, and Andrew Kennedy from Fire did a great
Did
demonstration.
a great job.
But it was, the crowd was lacking. And Tom came over. Yeah, I can't remember if he and Harper came. I don't remember. I remember Tom was there.
Yeah, Tom was there.
Yeah. So, but I think it's a great idea. But
Doing it this summer sometime.
yeah, I think that'd be great.
Forget when we did it.
And wherever y'all want to host it. Like I said, I'm happy to do it, or we can host it somewhere else, whatever y'all want to do.
At your farm, it's big.
Yeah. But that's a good thing and a bad thing.
No, yeah, because you got people that need to ride. Yeah.
If I invite my trainer to show up, she'll schedule around it so nobody else is there. It might be a little harder for you to do that. Hey, no riding between these hours. I'm sure you get some.
Well,
Yeah, you're right.
And
You're more of a commercial.
off the record, like I have all of our boarders, and then call every day. Hey, the fire safety thing, they said this. You're not doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, trust me, we had to move a bunch of our fire extinguishers around from it and all that stuff, and it was good.
Man, you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking
Yeah.
I do.
But anyway, I do think that's something we need to do, again soon. I think that'd be a
I do
really good
too.
thing. It would be really cool. Here's a wild idea. Could you incorporate the AED CPR and fire together?
Wouldn't that make it more worthwhile for everybody?
Not to bring up Mike Gubb's name again, but what he talked about that, like the what was he talking about? The
The AD.
no, the
T-layer.
yeah, and like in a catastrophe type situation, follow up on that.
Well, that's been kind of my
Roth Hutchinson
baby.
is the
I
battalion
wanted
chief.
to do that.
I don't know if y'all know Hutchinson.
Sure.
Hutch, he's the guy that owns the T-layer for the city. And he and I went back and forth after that meeting for like 2 weeks. He was out of town a week. I was out of town. And we kept saying we're going to meet, and I was going to introduce Mike to him.
Could we do those meetings together, fire
Yeah.
safety and that?
Good idea.
Yeah, that's a smart idea.
The only thing
Might
is
get a bigger
that
crowd,
that
too.
is kind of almost a little bit different of a crowd. I mean, we had yesterday in our CPR and AED training, there were 12-year-olds in
So
there.
maybe this crowd you draw,
Yeah,
so then you tailor it to the crowd that would be appropriate for both. They're not going to have endless space anyway.
Right.
But this would be an equestrian focused crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
this
all the
would be-
people that went yesterday were all
Oh,
equestrians.
wow.
Oh, that's
They were,
pretty cool.
they were all equestrians.
But you know what? I hate to say it. There's nothing in the world wrong with a 12-year-old coming and listening to a fire presentation, because
No.
if they're at the barn and something catches on fire, I'd want them to know what to do just as much as the.
Let me tell you what, my barn manager's 12-year-old daughter probably knows better what to do than I know what to do.
Sure.
Mhm.
Literally.
Yeah. So I'm all about the kids showing up for that thing.
No, I just think
could
the
bribe them with
length
some
of
Chick-fil-A,
the
they'd be there.
attention span is.
Yeah. You only
It
do
almost
this
seems
one.
like y'all need to hold like a
Right.
convention day.
What's that?
It sounds
Like a safety
it sounds like a lot of content to do in a 2 or 3 hour seminar. So if you were to do an educational day, and from 10 to 12 is CPR AED, and from 1 to 3 is barn fire safety,
Do
and
that.
4 to 5 or whatever, and just do this whole
The
educational
CPR one
day.
will last longer. The barn fire presentation is 45 minutes. You know, it's just Kennedy or whoever from fire
Mhm.
demonstrating and stuff or talking about it. So, but the other one is more hands-on, obviously.
Mhm.
Even though he did have the fire extinguisher demonstration at the barn fire thing, that was pretty interesting.
That was cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Emily, does the city have video equipment to record this? I think it'd be so cool if we had all these things we're doing
They
on YouTube.
Do, and that's
People
like,
could
that's what
rewatch.
Jen Hartwig used to do with
Right,
me.
yep.
And Jen does have a replacement, and I believe she came to our meeting.
She did.
She does, but
Oh, wow.
Oksana handles most of
Oksana.
our videos.
Yeah, Oksana. I could not remember her name. Yeah. All we have to do is call Oksana. She'll come.
I think it'd be cool if us as a group had a bunch of just, like you have a YouTube video of the fireworks. And
I have
just
2 of 'em.
if we had a trailer one, and you might already have that, but all these different things, I feel like we could really put some good stuff online that anyone could watch, whether they live here or not.
That's what my biggest push is. I mean, I want to have lots of seminars. I want to have, before fall happens, I want to have a seeding and fertilizing. I want to have the county extension come. I want equestrians to sign up for it, just like this.
So they did a Cuba. I was talking to somebody about the Cuba one, and they did that here like 2017.
Yeah.
In Fulton County, it was a lot different back then. And they were granting Cubas for under 10 acres, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen anymore, but
No.
that's something.
Well,
we
I'll
should
say on a
look at.
side note, that has nothing to do with CPR training, but I do really want to do another Cuba workshop. And I really want to get, and maybe
Yeah.
it's Emily, she needs to become the Cuba expert for the city of Milton. Just kidding.
But even with the public comment.
She's like, wait,
that's a
I'm
big
community
deal.
development.
Really?
No.
Really?
I
Somebody
think they're
on
changing the
staff
role of the
needs to
C
be-
in your title.
And they need, anytime somebody walks in the front door and says, I need to talk to somebody about a Cuba.
Yeah.
Whoever it is needs to come out if they're available and say, I'll answer any question you have about Cubas.
Who do you
But it-
think-
it's
I
gotta
think
be
people
said.
need to know what CUVA is, though. I mean, if somebody walked into City Hall and said, hey, I'm interested in a conservation easement.
But I bet, I mean, this is nothing against anybody at the front desk. But if somebody walked in and went up to that desk and said, I'd like to talk to somebody about putting a conservation easement on my farm. I can't imagine they'd go, would they? would
Lisa
anybody-
would probably know. I'm not kidding.
She
might. She does know.
Like I said, that
Lisa
wasn't
would
an
probably
insult at all.
know.
Well, it's I think this kind of circles back to what you guys have done with this farm census of we wanted to reach out to these barns and let them know that we are here to talk to.
Yeah.
You guys are the first people that we should send them to. You know a lot more than our staff does.
Yeah.
And you are
But none of us are
Kind
Cuba
of-
experts.
Mm-mm.
We did it on, I did it on my farm. It
It's
was very
complicated. It's
complicated.
very complicated.
No, we could be. It's not that bad. It's if you're over 10 acres, it's easy.
Well,
But they just said in.
it was not, it was confusing. I literally had Jeff Runner hold my hand
It was
while
confusing.
I filed. for
There's a
my-
guy in the state that's a great guy, but
I know exactly. Cajuns.
Gaten, yeah.
The last
And my
public
wife
comment.
went through it and boy, he got her through it, but it
I
wasn't,
did not think it was easy.
it wasn't like, oh, you got this many acres? Oh, okay, here, boom, it was not that easy.
But Carson, didn't they just say that 1/3 of the Cubas are on acres that are less than 10?
No, we have 94, give or take. I bet you there's 5 to 10 that are under 10 acres.
Oh, I thought the woman that made the public comment last month said there was like 200 Cubas and 100.
No,
were
I
less
know
than
there's-
10.
Eligible. I think she said
Eligible.
Eligible.
Yeah.
It's only half of them.
There's,
Yeah.
but then it's just
Yeah, that almost
complicated.
cuts my
'cause-
taxes in half.
100%.
I mean, good grief.
More.
La, 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 la.
So you can get Cuba for under 10 acres?
You can.
Yeah, of
Well,
course.
You
You
can
have
if
to
you get
follow
a
the
wild-
schedule
wildlife,
no, wildlife's over 10.
At 8.75,
I
that
heard
does
that,
not make me happy.
somebody told me, what's the guy that used to be on top? Hey, should we, let's,
Can we wrap this up?
yeah, let's wrap this up. First of all, does anybody have anything else?
We're about to talk more business. The mics have to stay on though.
We do the safety initiatives.
Yeah, we did. We're done
Oh, we're
already.
good.
Shop on
Yeah.
Cubas.
Okay.
Yeah, so, can I get a motion to adjourn? All right, we're adjourned at 7:42.